My mother is an ethnic German, was born in Kazakhstan in the 49th, was brought up at home before school, so she learned Russian only at school. Accordingly, he speaks German almost perfectly. My father was born and grew up in Ukraine in one of the villages of the Vinnytsia region. In the 66th, when he was 22, he volunteered to go to Kazakhstan to raise virgin soil, where he met my mother. In September 68, they got married and immediately left for Ukraine. They wanted to make their life there. In the early days, they wanted to get married again according to the church rite, since there was no such opportunity in Kazakhstan. The village is small, everyone knows everything about each other, and during the evening home gatherings, my father's grandmother told my mother about their neighbor, a witch who lived 2 houses away in the direction of the forest. They say this witch harms both people and pets, and keeps most of the inhabitants of the farm in fear. My mom is impressionable, she was scared, and my dad just laughed, said that it was all nonsense. No one knew how old the old woman was. Her parents said she looked 90 to 100 years old, all wrinkled, untidy, but she still moved quite cheerfully. From where, when exactly and how she appeared in the village, and whether she had relatives, maybe that's why rumors went that she was a witch. It was also unclear what she lived on. She did not have a vegetable garden as such, nor did she have cattle. In general, solid speculation. There were rumors that she could have caused damage by order. She etched unborn children. No one, of course, confessed, but abortions were not performed in hospitals. Then, in principle, it is clear where the funds for food came from. In those days, when my parents arrived, it was known that the old woman had been seriously ill for a couple of months and very rarely went outside. At such moments, she would stand at her fence and either silently, intently, angrily looked at those passing by, or cursed everyone, and tried to throw something, most often small pebbles or earth. People eventually figured it out, and when they saw her at the fence, they went to another street. The most interesting thing is that everyone who has ever met her and could more or less examine her said that her teeth were extremely well preserved, almost like those of young people, despite her age. On the day of the wedding, it was the second week after their move, Mom went out early in the morning to pray in the garden. I read the prayers in German, but I said that very quietly, almost to myself. No one standing more than half a meter away would be able to make out anything. And here he says, I open my eyes, and this old woman is standing behind the fence in front of me and looks at me with such malice, and when she saw that I noticed her, let's yell obscenities at me and curse. Among other things, she shouted, "Why did you come here, you non-Russian trash? And after all, how did you find out?" I was standing there. At first I couldn't figure anything out, but she put her hand in her pocket, took out something, threw a handful of dirt at me and hobbled away. I have tears in my eyes from resentment. The earth is stuck in my hair. I ran to the hut, and their grandma, my father's grandmother, just got up and wanted to put the dough. Well, I told her everything. And then grandma, according to her parents, a very quiet, cozy and calm person, started such a stormy activity. She woke up everyone who was still asleep, told her mother to close herself in the hallway, undress, put her clothes in a bag, put on a nightgown to her feet and let her hair down. She ordered my father to flood the bathhouse and drowned in the church. Pretty quickly she returned with 3 candles, took the old cross off the iconostasis, picked up her mother and a bag of clothes, and went to the bath. I steamed her for about 2 hours, washed her head until 3 candles burned down, and burned a bag of clothes in the sauna in the oven. The wedding was at noon. Everything went well. In the evening we went for a walk at home and went to bed. And at night my mother became ill, the temperature rose, a strange rash appeared, as if nettles were removed, only much brighter. She began to rave, trembling all over her body. Her father said she looked so bad, they thought she would die. The nearest hospital is 30 kilometers away. There are no cars. Great-grandmother was immediately called. She brewed some tea from her stocks, poured several mugs into it and read prayers over her all night. An hour and a half to 2 hours after the onset of symptoms, everything went away as suddenly as it started. and she fell asleep pretty quickly. In the morning she felt fine and remembered almost nothing. On the same day, he and his father had a big fight, almost for life and death, and now both do not know why. It got to the point that Mom packed a suitcase and walked to the station, also about 30 kilometers, to return to Kazakhstan. And then, again, the great-grandmother intervened. She caught up with her on the cart, persuaded her to go with her, at least for a while, to her house. She said it was a corruption, and she would try to remove it. Mom stayed with her for 4 days. Grandma did not let her out of the house, ran to church every day for candles, almost continuously read prayers, then over her mother, then in front of the iconostasis. The most interesting thing, Mom says that she sifted flour over her head several times every day and then put dough out of it and baked bread. The first loaf did not rise at all, it was more like a flatbread. Granny didn't touch her with her hands, took her through a towel, took her out of the house and buried her behind the vegetable garden. The second and third turned out much better, but still not as good as usual. The great-grandmother fed him to pigs. The fourth came out to glory, airy, rosy. She crumbled it to the pigeons and said that everything was fine now. Mom no longer held a grudge against her father at all and ran away to him the same evening. Parents say that during their family life, they quarreled more than once, not without it, but as on that day, they never swore again. And the great-grandmother became very ill 2 days later. She lay there for almost 2 weeks. They already thought they wouldn't come out, but then she moved away. Moreover, there were no definite symptoms as such, just bad weakness. The paramedic threw up his hands, said that, most likely, a hypertensive crisis and it was necessary to go to the hospital, but Grandma did not agree. Everything seems to have settled down on this. But a few weeks later it became known that the old woman was dying. They found out quite by accident. People passing by heard loud groans and inhuman howls from the house. In the evening a crowd gathered, the chairman pounded on the door for a long time, and the old woman laughed in the house and did not open it. The door was broken into, but no one wanted to enter the house. The paramedic had to go himself. After a couple of minutes, he came out and said that the old woman was terribly dehydrated, exhausted and lying in delirium. He can't do anything on the spot, and she won't survive the trip to the hospital. Therefore, we decided to let her die peacefully at home. We thought that she would not survive the night, but we made a big mistake. The next day, the moans and curses in delirium did not stop. There was always someone near the door, but they did not go inside, respectively. The stove was not heated. Winter had not yet begun, but the weather was quite cold and damp. It was constantly drizzling. Surely it was no more than 12 to 13 degrees in the house. Someone said that a witch will not die until she gives her gift. They decided that if he didn't die by morning, they would call a priest to beg. The chairman began to be indignant. He was a fairly young party atheist from somewhere in the district. They looked at him so frowningly, and half of the village at once, that he immediately quieted down. The next morning the old woman moaned on. The priest was called. We stood in the hallway almost opposite the bed. We did not dare to go into the room. In addition to the priest, there were several old ladies who sang along with him and 4 to 5 peasants from the village who were regularly replaced, among them my father. Dad said that the sight was not pleasant. On a greasy mattress lay an emaciated, skin and bones, gray-haired old woman with such black and evil eyes that everyone present tried not to catch her gaze. She lay restlessly, with barely moving lips, ejaculating some words from herself, sighs, curses, obviously referring to those present. Her bouts of impotence were replaced by aggression, black anger, in the gusts of which she tried to jump up from her deathbed, but then again fell on the bed in impotence. By the end of the 3rd day, the priest said that it was necessary to dismantle the roof over the bed so that her soul could finally move away. The chairman began to be indignant again, shouted that he would not allow damage to property and would report everything to the district committee. The chairman was punched in the face and locked in the stable. They said that no one would believe anyway that the whole village rebelled, and there were also very respected people in the district committee. 3 men climbed onto the roof and began to disassemble the roof and ceiling above the bed. By 11 p.m. everything was ready. My father said that when the rustling on the roof began, the old woman quieted down, no longer made almost a sound and did not take her eyes off the ceiling, and then from the hole. About an hour and a half later, after the roof was dismantled, the old woman died with a long sigh. This, in my opinion, is where the mysticism begins. My father helped to put the old woman in the coffin, and when he bent over her, he was shocked. Almost all the teeth were in place in her mouth. As I mentioned, people said that her teeth were in very good condition. But they were almost completely rotten, black and yellow stumps, especially the front ones. They were broken off and worn off more than half. My father said he had this picture in front of his eyes for the rest of his life. When he told his mom at home, she didn't believe it. She said it or imagined it or was making it up, but the great-grandmother confirmed it. She also sang her funeral there. If the teeth were really good, then they could not have come to such a state in a few weeks. For the last 5 to 7 years, the old woman Defy Knightley did not leave the village. There was no dentist there. For prostheses, it is necessary that your own teeth be removed. And there were no such prostheses then. Was everyone imagining things? The house was set on fire as soon as the coffin with the body was taken out, at least until the 87th year. In the 87th we were in Ukraine for the last time. When my grandmother died, there was a vacant lot overgrown with weeds.